Hello, welcome to the Sensory Clinic at Thrive Child Development Center. Thank you so much for your patience as we revamped our Sensory Clinic services to reach our clients and their families' needs during these unprecedented times. I'm very excited to have these opportunities for you right now to have these online services and offer this as an option. The first focus of this clinic is to build the capacity of parents, caregivers, and educators to see sensory processing as a factor impacting function and the ability to engage in everyday tasks. The goal here is to build an understanding capacity to assist families in learning to be their own detectives in identifying sensory processing challenges, how it might be getting in the way of daily functioning, and what that looks like. We will also provide some general strategies and techniques to get you started. We'll base our education on the Winnie Dunn model and theory, as well as Kim Barthel's approaches to education and sensory processing differences and the approaches to therapy. Now, the purpose of this video, again, is to provide our families with general introduction to sensory processing and the approaches that therapists at Thrive use to address these sensory concerns. So please note that the creators are occupational therapists and often work with sensory processing differences. However, we are not experts in this area, nor do we claim to be. We do have a lot of experience working with children with sensory processing differences and have attended various education, but we are not experts in the area. The content of these videos may not be reproduced or redistributed at any time without express permission from Thrive Child Development Center. These resources are only provided for informational purposes only, and they're not to be substituted for any professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment, which should be provided from a qualified healthcare provider. After you watch these videos, you will have access to consultative services with an occupational therapist for up to 8 sessions at Thrive Child Development Center in the Sensory Clinic, but this can vary based on need. However, if you do have a core occupational therapist, you will be able to follow up with them regarding any questions or concerns of sensory processing and intervention to follow. Hello, thanks for tuning in today. My name is Justine Sluage, and I'm an occupational therapist at Thrive Child Development Center. I've been working there for about 6 years, and I've seen a variety of children with different sensory processing differences, which we'll get into some examples and things like that later. So if you're watching this today, you're probably interested in learning more about what sensory processing it is, how it affects everyday life, and you may have a child, a student, or someone that you know who's really struggling at certain times or with certain activities throughout the day. You might be trying to figure out what's going on. Why is this happening? You might have tried a million different things to try and help with it and not sure why it's not really helping. My goal here today is to help you develop an understanding about what sensory processing is and provide you with some tools to help you break down the factors and impact our functioning. To start, I would just like you to write down 1 to 3 things that are causing a breakdown or dysfunction with a child. It could be things like taking a bath, taking a shower, going out to a store, or different sort of things like that. Okay, now I would just like you to also write on a scale of 1 to 10 how challenging this is for your child, yourself, or your family. And you can write down 3 different things if you like. So if you want to write down how challenging you think it is for your child, how challenging it is for yourself, or how challenging it is for your family or someone else that you know, you can do that as well. So occupational therapy is a profession that focuses on function, participation, and well-being. OTs can assist with clients and families with activities of daily living. Self-care, such as things like routine and hygiene, productivity, such as things like school, work, and being out in the community, as well as things with leisure, like play, hobbies, and activities that are meaningful to us. So, sensory processing is the way that we interact with the world around us through all the different types of sensory input that are within our environments, and also our bodies, which are our internal senses, to help us interpret these external factors and organize them to make sense to us. It also affects how we respond to this information, which I'll also get to later. So some examples of the external environment are like bright lights, loud sounds, other people, things like wall paint, decor, and things in the environment like that. The input from our body would be the information about where our body is in space and how we interpret the external environment on our nervous system. So the nervous system sends the messages to our brain, and it helps us figure out, what do we do with this information and how do I respond to it? So all of this information goes to the brain, and like I just said, and it's processed there. So that is why it's called sensory processing, because all of the sensory factors are being processed in your brain. So you may also hear it called sensory integration or different terms like that. It's all very relative. We can tell if the brain's processing information well by the observable behavior or the adaptive response. So if we're not responding appropriately, that's more of a maladaptive response. So there's a reason why something's breaking down, and we're going to try and help you figure out why and what we can do to help manage it. So sometimes it can be a challenge to figure these things out and determine where the breakdowns are coming from, because there are 8 different senses and endless possible reasons for environmental factors that are influencing that. So it's really hard to figure out what it might be, because it could be a million different things. So it takes a long time to figure out what it might be. Additionally, we often think about what might be the cause for the dysfunction, and what we figure might not be the sole reason. So there might be multiple reasons, which makes it even more complex. There are also factors such as expected and unexpected variables. So those things that are expected are things that we anticipate, things that happen every day, and things that are well known to us. Things that are unexpected are things that happen without knowing it will happen, or something that there's a big change that occurs. So kind of things like that. So for example, if we know that there's going to be a fire alarm at 9:30 to 10 o'clock a.m., which we often have at Thrive, we're going to respond a lot differently than if we have an unexpected alarm in the middle of the night going off, like a fire alarm. So it's just, it really, these kind of time of day factors, how tired we may be, all these things really influence how we respond to sensory input. So it's important to document the time of day, what's going on in the setting, because these really influence how we respond with sensory factors. So just here, I'm going to put in a short video. It's going to be a video example 1 with Mallory and I. So we'll just take a little break to tune into that video, and we'll be right back.
Hello, my name's Justine here, and this is Mallory. We're going to do a couple of videos for you just to show some demonstrations about sensory processing and how it can affect your performance. So the first thing that we're going to do today, Mallory, is to get you to write a sentence. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Okay. And now I'm going to try and distract you a little bit throughout that process, and we're going to talk about how that felt and what went well and what was challenging for you. Does that sound okay?
Yep. And I use my right hand?
I would like you to use your non-dominant hand.
Okay.
Make it a little bit more of a challenging task.
Okay.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What's the phrase you're going to be ready?
The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
Perfect. All right. So when I say go, we're going to get started on that, okay?
Okay.
Go.
Very annoying.
Cool, right? Whoa, okay, now we can stop that.
Perfect.
Okay, so how did you find that?
It's annoying.
It's annoying? What was annoying about it?
I had to focus so hard because I was writing with my non-dominant hand, and that was preventing me from focusing.
Okay, what was probably the most challenging, or
the sound?
Other phrase, the sound?
Yeah.
Over the lights?
Yeah.
So the lights were less distracting for you? Yeah, that was a very annoying sound. And how do you think the environment affected your performance? So let's take a peek here at your...
Well, I'm not...
Good job.
I'm going to hold that up, but I'm not that good at using my left hand. But I found towards the end, I just wanted it to be done, so I just started speeding through it.
Yeah. Oh, I can see that. Yeah.
Just because I'm like, it's too much. I want to get done, then I would start to go faster, which made it less legible.
Right. Do you think it would have been less distractible if we just had the lights on for you, since that was less.
I think it'd been very good if you had to turn the lights off or put that light sound on.
Either or.
Yeah.
So there's 3 challenging things. There was the writing with your non-dominant hand, there was the lights flickering, and also the sound. So the most prominent difficult task for you was trying to manage with the sound. That's very annoying sound.
Yeah.
And then the next, would you say it would be using your non-dominant hand or the lights?
The non-dominant hand.
The non-dominant hand, and then the lights was less bothersome. Yeah. So again, everyone's sensory system's a little bit different. So if you practice this activity at home, you might observe some differences for whether if it was the lights that was more bothersome for you, or if it was using the non-dominant hand that was really difficult for you as well. So it can really depend on your sensory processing system and what you can filter better than other things.
All right. So I hope that when you see the videos, you're doing them too. It's kind of fun to follow along and just try whatever Mallory and I are doing to see how you also respond to it. So I hope you thought about what was challenging about the activity, how did the environment really impact your performance, and think about things that made it more difficult and how it might be different for you or your child or somebody else that you might know. So occupational therapy. So you might be wondering how occupational therapy can tie into this and how can we help? So occupational therapists use a variety of assessment tools. We have skilled observation and tracking that help us do a lot of our detective work to determine what's causing breakdown of information or messages being sent, and or how, while providing adaptations to the environment, the body or other factors might be causing dysfunction to our sensory input and responses. So as mentioned earlier, there are 8 senses. So in general, people are aware of 5 of the external senses, and less people are aware of the 3 internal senses. We'll begin by exploring the external senses, which are hearing, otherwise known as auditory, vision, otherwise known as ocular, smell, otherwise known as olfactory, taste, otherwise known as gustatory, and touch, otherwise known as tactile. So we'll start with the auditory system. So the auditory system orients us to the sounds in our environment and help us know where to focus our attention with our ocular sense. So many things affect us from the auditory system, including the intensity of the sound, the length of the sound, and where the sound is coming from. So in terms of dysfunction, or how this breakdown can happen, is when the sound is considered adverse, or it can cause maybe a fight or flight response, depending on the auditory factors and how our internal senses respond to it. Dysfunction can also occur when children have a difficulty tuning into the important information and can become overwhelmed when there are multiple sounds in the environment. So like typical things in the classroom, like the lights above, the fluorescents. It could be the buzzing, it could be the teacher talking, rustling of papers, children whispering, the announcements going on, and different sounds coming from outside. So during family functions, for example, some kids can have breakdowns because lots of people talking at the same time, music as well as other people talking, and other environmental sounds, clinging and clanging of dishes, things like that can be very overwhelming to some of these children. So some children have a difficult time also locating where that sound is coming from. And that makes attending with their ocular system quite difficult. So if you hear something and you hear it coming from the left side, you're going to tune into the left side and look over to the left. But some kiddos have a hard time figuring out where that sound's coming from, and they don't know where to place their attention. Some children can also be over responders and also be very reactive to this input. So we refer to our family doctors, pediatricians, audiologist experts, and speech language pathologists, as well as OHIP hearing tests to help support us with this sense. So the ocular or the visual system helps us orient movement in the visual field by helping us see things in our environment. It helps us figure out where things are and if they're moving, and it gathers this information to help us plan, organize, and adapt to environmental factors. The visual system really helps us integrate all of the other senses. Children with autism spectrum disorder have a huge strength with this sense. This is why they can often tell if there's just a subtle difference in the environment. They can tell if the color of the food is just a little bit different. They can tell if there's a change of clothing. They're also very sensitive to different changes like hairstyles. For example, if you put your hair up in a ponytail, you're going to look a lot different than if your hair is down. So a child with autism might even look at you as a different person or unsure of that big change. That's a big change. So things like that seem very subtle are very impactful to children with autism spectrum disorder. So just things to think about. Faces can also be difficult for these children because there's so many different facial expressions, and that can be really confusing to a variety of children, but especially children with autism spectrum disorder. For children with autism who are nonverbal, we really need to think about these things because they are highly receptive to the sense, really impacted by it, and we really need to think about how these factors can really impact their functioning and stress levels. So dysfunction can often result in differences with tracking objects, inability to attend or focus to specific stimuli, and we often refer to family doctors, pediatricians, optometrists, and ophthalmologists to support us with this sense. So the smell or the olfactory system, so this helps us detect the intensity of a smell and where it might be coming from. When something smells bad, it sends a protective response to the brain that something is dangerous or unpleasant. This is the only sense that is actually processed immediately, and it's really close to the emotional center of the brain, which really affects our emotion. For example, the smell of lavender can be very calming, and some other smells can bring us back to memories that we have repressed or take us back to grandma's house, things like that. So if there's a dysfunction of this sense, children can be very reactive to smells and can sometimes not tolerate being in the house if someone's cooking a specific food, or have a difficult time going to a restaurant or different environments. This system is also much related to the taste system. So think about plugging your nose and trying to eat something and how there's a lot less taste involved. It might be a lot less intense or taste differently. We often refer to family doctors, pediatricians, ENT specialists to help us assist with the olfactory system when there's some dysfunction going on there. The gustatory system or the taste system helps us determine how a food tastes, if it's sweet, salty, sour, bitter, or if it has the MSG flavor. As we age, our taste buds will decrease, and that's why children who are sensitive are much more sensitive to spice and flavor. We often refer to family doctors, pediatricians, the feeding clinic here at Thrive, speech language pathologists, or ABA specialists to help us support us with this sense.
Hey Mel, I have another activity for you.
Perfect.
Okay, so this one's going to be with feeding. So before I go and get your snack, I'm going to come over and ask you to close your eyes.
Okay.
And you're going to try the three different types of foods that will be presented to you, and you're going to eat them with your eyes closed. You're going to have a spoon, so you're going to have to try and just be able to find your spoon. Try and start with that one first, because then you can get that out of the way. And then there will be two other snacks for you to try. And I want you to talk to us about what you're tasting, what the texture is like, and just noticing any kind of differences that may or may not be different with your eyes closed as well.
Okay.
That sound good? Okay. All right.
So I'm closing my eyes and pinching my, okay.
Yes.
There we go.
And I'm going to come over and put this in front of you. Okay, now you
Okay,
can
now
remove your mask. I'm going to be away.
Okay.
And if you would pinch your nose, yeah, perfect. Thank you. And go ahead and try and find that spoon. It's with the cup, yep. And then your spoon will be in there. Perfect, already in there for you.
This could get messy.
It could.
Well, it tastes like applesauce.
That's good.
Do I keep eating it or try and find
Sure,
another?
another bite. Talk to us about what the experience is like for you. What is it?
Well, my ears are popping where I swallow with my nose plugged.
Uh-huh.
And it's hard because I have no idea if I'm going to pour this on me or put it in my mouth. It's mushy like applesauce and tastes like
And you can
applesauce.
still get that flavor, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it feels like an applesauce cup.
Great. Yeah, that also helps.
Go on to something else.
Yep.
So this feels flat and crunchy. Ooh. It's a baby cracker. What are those? Is it a mama? A mum?
Yeah. Cracker.
Mama?
Is that a flavor to it?
No. It tastes pretty bland.
Okay.
And it
I'm
gets-
not going to put you through
It gets
anymore.
mushy in my mouth. I can't believe I feed these to my kids.
And one more thing. Good job.
This is sticky. Well, it's a Rice Krispie square.
Yep.
But it doesn't really taste like anything.
You can't really get the flavors from it, eh?
No.
Okay, perfect. Open your eyes. Finish your sip.
Oh. Okay.
Great. Okay, so tell me about that experience for you. Like, were you surprised by anything when you had your eyes closed trying those 3 different things?
I'm surprised by how bland the Mum Mums were.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised that I didn't really taste the Rice Krispie square.
Yeah. And do you think that you would have tasted more of it if your eyes were open, if you had that visual?
Yeah, because when I ate the rest of it, I totally tasted it.
Yeah, it's kind of, so that's what we're trying to get at today is sometimes, well, the visual system has such a huge empowerment when it comes to the foods that we eat, and the presentation of what they look like really impacts how we taste the food. So if we eliminate one of those sensory feedbacks, then it's going to change how that food tastes to us.
Well, really hard to use the spoon too if you can't see, because I didn't know, like, am I close to my mouth? I don't know.
So that's relying on a lot of your proprioceptive system, right?
Yeah.
And knowing how fast to move it. So if you rush that spoon right to your mouth, not knowing how to use your proprioceptive system, you'd have been wearing it, but you have a really good control with that, so you're able to manage it. And were you surprised at all that you were able to identify that it was applesauce quite quickly?
Well, I think it's a pretty unique
Container
texture.
you to identify it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. And Mum, were you surprised that there was the flavor of that at all, or
There
the
is
texture at
zero
all?
flavor.
And have you ever actually eaten one of those?
I
before?
have
Okay.
eaten them. And I think they do have a bit, like the ones I have bought in the past, do have a bit of flavor.
Yep.
But that has none.
So if you have something similar at home, 3 different things. So I tried to go for something that was chewy, and something that was crispy, and then something that was like a puree form. So trying 2 different types of textures and different varieties if you can. So I tried to go with something sweet, something bland, and I would like to go with something salty, but I didn't have anything like that here. So you want to try different things and try them with your eyes closed. Try different settings. Try pinching your nose and see if you notice a difference, and see if what sensory systems you really rely on. Because I was pretty surprised too, Mallory, about the Rice Krispie square and how that it wasn't, it doesn't really taste like a Rice Krispie square. I can tell by the texture, but it doesn't really taste like it. So just play with it and help you learn a little bit more about your kiddos and how these things might be impacting their ability to eat as well.
Now we have the tactile sense. So this is such an imperative sense for understanding our environments. This system can really pose a big challenge in the sensory clinic, especially when it's associated to children who have autism. The tactile system affects almost everything we do, from dressing to eating to brushing our teeth, brushing our hair, washing our body and our hair, bathing, sitting, and interacting with objects. Children who have a difficult time with identifying touch or can be responsive to touch can be really reactive, which results in them avoiding touch overall, or maybe they seek it and they can't stop. Some kids can't pick up the food with their fingers because of the tactile feeling of it. Some children lick their mouth and lick everything constantly because they're just seeking that input. So the 2 main functions of the tactile sense are the protective response, so to know the pain and temperature modulations, things like that, and the discriminative response. So this is knowing how to provide pressure and to discriminate objects from different texture, sizes, and density. So what I mean by providing pressure is to how much force you need to pick up an object, things like that. So we often refer to family doctors, pediatricians to help us with the tactile systems if we're noticing some differences there in addition to the sensory clinic.
Now we're going to go through what areas of sensory processing can help us determine what items are. So we have this little fancy bag here, and Mallory's going to reach her hand in and try and guess what the items are and talk about what sensory components are telling her what the items might be and what's giving her clues as to what these items are. So Mallory, I've sanitized my hands and pass this over to you.
Okay.
And just reach in and tell us about what you're getting and how you know what it might be.
This is a wooden shape, possibly a bead because there's holes in it. I can just tell by how it feels and the shape of it. I want to say it's a barnyard animal, maybe.
How do you know it's wooden?
Because it feels like wood.
Okay.
Like it's hard and smooth. It feels like one of my kids' wooden block puzzle pieces.
All right, now let's see it. All right, good cue about the bead too, like how the bead.
Not a barn animal, but
very close. Very good. That's a tricky one.
Oh, this is one of the things that goes on our tents when we're working with kids. Because you can put your finger in it. There's the hole. I can feel the wiggly, squiggly arms on it.
On the pen lights, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
This one feels funny. It's squishy, but there's something hard in it. I'll bring it up so people won't get another.
You can't make out what it might be.
It's like a toy bug.
Pretty close.
Oh, thing. That. Oh, one feels like a cube. Is there a cube with like pokey things on it?
Possibly.
I don't know what it is though.
No?
But it feels hard. It feels like a cube with like prickles on it.
You're right.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh, there's some cotton balls.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there we go. And there's a pom-pom.
You're quick. And good differentiating between the cotton ball and the pom-pom.
There is a little, I'll call it a golf pencil. Something that feels like an eraser. Is it an eraser?
Possibly. Let's see it.
Oh.
You're right.
Yeah. And then the last thing, it's long and hard and open. I think it's scissors.
Yep. You're right. So what was helpful in helping you determine what those items were, and what do you think could have helped you more?
Well, if I saw them, it would obviously be a lot faster. But just knowing like the shapes and the textures, and then for most of them, I was able to I had a visual representation to attach it to.
Mm-hmm.
So that helped as well.
So that's why it's much easier with everyday tools like the pencil or the scissors. Those were a little bit quick for you to identify, whereas things, or the cotton ball and the pom-poms were also. But the bug guy, this little lizard guy, was really difficult because you're like, it's squishy, I don't really know how to describe it. So trying to describe it was really challenging. So because you have that awareness, it was really a lot more easy for you.
Yeah.
But if you have difficulty with your tactile sensory processing, then you're going to have more difficulty knowing that it's smooth, or knowing that it's bumpy, or knowing that it's squishy, or things like that, to help differentiate the difference between the items. More or less, you'd be more identifying the size would be more easy to identify than all these different texture components of these items. So that's why you have a really good tactile sensory system that helps you determine all those items.
And this is why I can stick my hand in my purse that's full of stuff that doesn't need to be in there. And I'm still able to dig around without looking to find my keys or my phone or my hand sanitizer.
Exactly.
So the proprioceptive sense, this is the sense that helps us determine where our body position is in space, as well as the perception of our movement. So this system involves receptors from our skin, our muscles, our tendons, and our joints that send messages to our brain. It has a huge component of self-regulation, concentration, body awareness, coordination, body positioning, and all sorts of other things. It works really closely with the vestibular sense to help us keep upright and know when our position has changed, for example, if we're on a swing or Bosu ball or different kind of things like that. It also helps us notify our body where our body parts are going through space. so that we don't have to look at them. So I know that I want my arms to reach up, and I just know how to do that. I don't have to look at my arms in order to know that they're going in the right location. I can feel it and sense it. So just try it yourself and just reach up and reach down, and you can feel all of the muscles, all of the tendons that are all engaging and all interacting to tell yourself that they're up. So those are the messages that are being sent to your brain. Now, children who have dysfunction with the sense often experience challenges in terms of bumping into things, crashing, too rough of play, or not enough pressure on things such as a pencil, or they might want clothing really tight because they need that extra feedback because their brains aren't getting that from their muscles, on their muscles, tendons, and things like that. So they're seeking out other ways to get more. Occupational therapists can help with the sense by modulating the input required to manage function. For example, incorporating heavy work or deep pressure activities throughout the day to help heighten awareness of these senses. So we will do things like beanbag squishes, animal walks, push-ups, jumping, and things like that. We also consult with our family doctors, pediatricians, and physiotherapists for assistance when we're working on this sense. The vestibular sense is responsible for detecting movement, position, direction, and movement of the head as well. So this system involves the organs, receptors that send messages to the brain from our inner ear. These receptors detect the fluid movement deep inside your ears and sends information about where our head and body is in space. It's highly related to the sound sense because of where it is, and it also tells us where something in our environment is, which is closely related in terms of orientation. So if you think about if you have an ear infection or if you have vertigo or things like that, those are all really related to having a different kind of amount of fluid and things like that in your ears, or other reasons as well. But a lot of the time it has to do with that fluid in the ear that's offsetting those inputs and those messages being sent to the brain to know where your body position is in space. It helps us distinguish in relation to gravity. We consider the sense the master of all senses because it helps integrate all the senses. It helps integrate touch to grab and reach something. It integrates vision, it integrates sound and proprioception. It can often occur in children who have gravitational insecurity, balance and coordination difficulties, motor control of the eye, such as tracking, scanning, things like that. Also, children who have difficulties moving through space or in different environments, so going on swings and things like that, they might have difficulty with that sort of thing. Children who are over-responsive may fear walking, swinging, jumping, and children who are under-responsive may seek these things impulsively and constantly, and they might have difficulty stopping, even if they're unaware that they are moving this way. So with occupational therapy, we work to, again, integrate the sense by modulating their input and through using different types of movement activities, and a graded approach that we may change the head or body position to assist with input levels throughout the day. We can also target the awareness of the environment to help assist with their positional awareness. And we'll often consult with our family doctors, pediatricians, physiotherapists, optometrists, and ophthalmologists as well for this sense. So we have a couple of videos here just to give you some examples, and it would be really awesome if you followed along and tried these activities with Mallory and myself, just so you can get a feel of what it's like and what that sense feels like. So we just have a couple of videos here we're gonna play, and then we'll come back to talk about the interoception sense.
Okay, Mel, now we're going to try another activity.
Okay.
What I'm going to get you to do is close your eyes. Now, can you reach your right arm up to the sky and your left arm behind your back? And now come back to neutral. And open your eyes. What systems do you think helped you with that process?
I think, again, my proprioception, because it lets me know how I'm oriented in space, and if that's up and this was behind.
Yep. Definitely. So it interplays again with your proprioceptive and your vestibular system, helping you know where your body is in space and what is up and what is down, and helping you with that orientation to help move her body parts through space.
And then if I kept my eyes open, how would that have changed that?
Yeah, so if you open up your eyes, then you can rely a lot more on your visual system as well. With your eyes closed, you're eliminating that visual system to look up at your arm and look up. When your eyes are closed, you're only relying on those two systems. Okay, now we're going to try another activity, Mal. So now you're sitting here on the ground. Can you lay on your back for me?
Yep.
And now lay on your side. And now lay back on your back. And point to the ceiling. And how do you know which way is up?
I don't know. That's
What-
the ceiling.
What sensory systems do you think helped you get through all of those positions?
My proprioceptive.
Yeah.
And my vestibular.
And so why do you say proprioceptive system?
Because that's just, it helps your body know where it is in space.
Mhm.
And I'm laying facing up.
So how does your vestibular system help with that process?
Oh, it just helps with the movement.
And it also helps you know what way is up.
Right.
Because of the way that the fluid's moving in your ears, and it changes your position, but then it changes so that you're able to still know which way is up, which way is here, and what way is down.
The interoception sense is relatively newly known. Not that it hasn't always been around, it's just we're more aware of it. So this is the sense of how we feel about our body, our emotions, and our organs. It is an imperative sense for self-awareness, homeostasis of the body, and our emotions. Some examples of this are knowing when we feel happy or sad, the feeling of having to go to the washroom, feeling hungry, or feeling hot and cold, and knowing those differences and what our body might need to offset that. Some examples of children who might have dysfunction with the sense often have difficulty with toileting because they have a lack of sensation or that urge to go, or perhaps they don't understand what that sensation means. They might also have difficulty with temperature regulation and may forget to put on a sweater or a jacket when it's cold, or they might also have differences with pain thresholds. That's another big one. So if children are over-responsive with a heightened reaction to these senses, they might be really sensitive to certain just the slight dip in temperature or things like that. But if they are very under-responsive, they may not be aware of what their body needs. So some interventions that we can help with interoception are like yoga, deep breathing activities, meditation, proprioceptive activities, and some cognitive strategies like visual schedules tracking, social stories, and helping them understand their bodies and what they're trying to tell them. We'll often consult with our family doctors, pediatricians, physiotherapists for assistance when we're working on this sense. So our 8 senses are at the core for all of our day-to-day activities. I hope that you really got that when we went through all of the different senses and understand like how all of these different senses can really impact every single moment of our day. From sitting to jumping to eating to planning to toileting to managing our emotions, our memory, social participation, and self-esteem, and so much more. This is why understanding the sensory system and how helping it function normally or successfully is really imperative to understanding the underlying function of engagement and function at home, school, and the community. Now we're going to talk a little bit about theories. So we have the big cup and little cup theory. So this is the idea that the big cup versus the little cup based on our brain's ability to respond to a sensation. So the big cup, for example, can tolerate a lot of sensory input. So they're able to block out sensory input easily because they can handle so much of it. These kiddos tend to be either low registration or sensory seeking kiddos, and they either actively or passively seek sensory input. The little cup kiddos, on the other hand, cannot tolerate as much sensory input, and therefore they can't block out the sensory input as well, which is resulting in adverse responses. So these kiddos can tend to be our sensory sensitivity or our sensory avoiding children, and they are either actively or passively avoiding the sensory input as well. We also have the Winnie-Dunn theory. So this is about the low registration sensory seekers, sensory avoiders, and sensory sensitivity kiddos. There are 4 basic patterns of sensory processing. So one is the sensory sensitivity. So these kiddos have a low threshold for sensory experiences and passively avoid the input to help themselves self-regulate. So these kids may present as being very cautious or easily affected by environmental factors. They're very detail-oriented and able to discriminate or focus on detail. They have a high level of awareness, and they do have a really easily triggered fight or flight response. They can absorb all inputs, and they detect input and notice more sensory events than others. And they might also comment on them regularly rather than moving away from them. An example is someone who is really sensitive to like bright lights or loud noises in the classroom, and their strategy may be to put their head back down when it's too bright or zone out when it gets too loud. These are also the kids that may appear anxious, distractible, squirmy, and will do some pushing behaviors because they don't have the skills to address their sensitivities. So it's important to note that these kids may be sensitive to the sensory inputs that we can't even pick up on, such as the humming of the lights. And the world can be a really scary and overwhelming place for these kiddos because everything is just so overwhelming to them. Then we have our sensory avoiding kiddos. So these kiddos have a low threshold for sensory experiences. They actively avoid input to help themselves self-regulate. They may present as distressed by unfamiliar input, rigid, uncooperative, withdrawn, or appear to have some anxiety, and they may also run away often and involve themselves in some hitting, kicking, or aggressive behaviors like that. This is all due to their fear of change or something that's unexpected. So they prefer procedures and clear expectation in complex environments. They tolerate and enjoy also being alone, and sensory input bothers these avoidant people. So they try to really limit themselves in the input they must deal with. They prefer a higher rate of familiar input, and they really limit the exposure to new or unexpected inputs. Then we have our sensory seekers. These kiddos have a high threshold for sensory experiences and are actively seeking input to help themselves self-regulate. They want or need more sensory input than others. So when they receive it, they become more dysregulated by it. These kiddos may present as often running, crashing, spinning, climbing, up and down, active and busy kids. They're easily excited and very animated. They're very energetic and very creative. They can often be the facilitator of change, and they may need to enjoy high levels of sensory stimulation to generate extra input for themselves. So they engage well in new activities, but they often lose interest easily and quickly and abandon activities. For example, these are the kiddos who may seek some rough play, spinning, love to play in the mud and the sand, listen to the radio really loud, and push kids too hard because they're not aware of their own strength. We also have our low registration kiddos. So these are the kiddos that don't generally have behaviors, and unfortunately they're often forgotten about. So these are the passive kiddos who need more input, but they don't have the ways to get it. For example, these kids don't know how to respond to the teacher when their name is called. They aren't doing it to be rude or non-compliant. They just quite haven't heard or registered that the teacher is calling their name. This is often a concern for lots of parents and teachers, and that's when these kiddos will be brought to our attention. They often have a high pain threshold, and they might not register the heat of a stove or the temperature of water, for example, until it's too late. So these kiddos might appear as the ones that are drifting away, ignoring, slow moving. They might also be conscientious or focused despite distractions. So they may appear uninterested and take time to respond to things. So they might also find it very difficult to get going in the morning, and they may appear as casual, easygoing, accommodating and comfortable in most environments, and they're oblivious to ongoing activity they're engaging around them. So they don't pick up on subtle environmental cues, and they require very clear directives and step-by-step instructions to help them be successful. So arousal is secondary to the three elements, which are sensation, emotion, and cognition. Arousal is how alert we are, which incorporates our ability to focus, concentrate, and perform. This depends on several things, including messages from our nervous system, self-regulation skills, and behavioral responses within our environment. Self-regulation skills encompass our sensory processing, cognition, and emotion, which are responses from our environmental factors. So different tasks require different levels of arousal. Consider that concerns with arousal are most noted in the classroom, as where children have to sit and attend, and this may not be the best approach for learning for some of these children. For learning to take place, we need to be in the optimal level of arousal. So the typical nervous system has the flexibility to adapt from one state to another with ease. Many of our children that we see have difficulty with this ability and tend to be in sensory overload or low arousals, which are not optimal states of learning. If a child is beyond sensory overload, they can appear in a flooded state. And this is ironically presenting as calm and regulated, but they're flooded and overdone. This is really important to note because sensory input can often affect the nervous system and influence levels of arousal, which impact our ability to learn and be in an optimal state of arousal. So is it sensory or is it behavioral? This is a huge underlying question in trying to determine the reason for behaviors. Is it sensory or is it behavioral? And I'm going to try and help you develop some tools and understanding to help be a detective of which it might be. So every behavior has a purpose or a motivator. Just remember that. Sensory behaviors are behaviors arising from sensory processing difficulties, which they have to do to fulfill an unmet sensory need. Each of the 4 sensory processing patterns have commonly seen behaviors. So based on the theories, they may present as low registration, so our drifting, ignoring, slow moving. Our sensory seekers are running, crashing, spinning, climbing, jumping. Our sensory sensitivity kiddos, so distractible, squirmy, pushing, and our sensory avoiding kiddos running away, hitting, and kicking. Now, the non-sensory motivators are task difficulties, motivation, reaction to others, escape, attention, tangibility, anxiety, and communication difficulties. These all help us determine if the reasons for the behavior are sensory or not. And we can use some of these assessments, such as the ALSUP, which is the assessment of lagging skills, the MAS, which is the motivational assessment scale, which helps us lead discussion in determining next steps. The MAS particularly helps us identify if the behavior is sensory in nature, escape, attention, or tangible. And we use all the sources from the escape, attention, and tangible motivators in our everyday choices based on preferences and lived experiences. So we use these things every day, some adaptively and some maladaptively. Now, we mostly look at the maladaptive reasons, but you can think of everyday activities that you adaptively use these. We also use a lot of tracking sheets to confirm if the intervention is having an impact. At Thrive, we help children who have sensory needs which cause behavior. So if one of these motivators is a motivator is the reason for the behavior, then we would try to refer you to other appropriate services for your intervention that will be different depending on what the motivator is and what you might need to help get there. We also need to consider if the motivator is for the behavior, not always based on sensory processing, self-regulation, arousal, trauma, and any other kind of mental health differences that can impact our behavior, whether it's typical or atypical. The key is being the behavior detective and using this knowledge, skills, and strategies to help to determine the reasoning behind specific behaviors. So we want to note things like what time of day it is, who was in the room, what other objects were in the room, what followed suit after, and all those different kind of things can intervene to determine whether it is a maladaptive or adaptive response, and if it is sensory or if it is a behavioral response based on motivators within that environment and that time of day. So now we're going to talk about assessments and intervention. I'm going to start with assessments and then talk about intervention. I kind of got a little bit into it in the last section, is it sensory or is it behavioral, and talking about some of the assessments that we use, but I'll get a little more into it now. So the types of assessment we use are tracking, parent interviews, clinical observations, assessments such as the sensory profile, the sensory processing measure. Now these assessments are questionnaires that highlight overall areas of dysfunction in different senses, such as the auditory, vision, vestibular, etc., and it helps us look at the whole child. We also use the motivational assessment scale, and this questionnaire again looks at specific behavior and its motivator and the reason why they might be doing a certain behavior. We also use the ALSUP, which is a tool to help us determine which skills may be lagging and causing them to have difficulty with activities throughout their day, which may be presenting behaviors. So we also use, the types of intervention that we go forward with, we have a scale, which is we focus on the most evidence-based to the least evidence-based. So we'll start up at the top at the most evidence-based. This is the most inclusive, less intrusive to the child, and we also look at the intervention further down the pyramid. We're going to see the more intrusive approaches and least inclusive approaches. So we start with coaching and education. So coaching focuses on building capacity through education and demonstration in order to empower you to be the sensory investigators and problem solvers, to build competence and capacity in identifying these sensory needs, choosing the appropriate sensory tools and strategies, and increasing your child's self-awareness and adaptive responses. So really focusing on building that capacity. The next is the environmental and task modification. So how can we modify the tasks to help with these senses? So we can look at time, transitions, routine, flexibility, and motivation. And some examples of this are providing structured daily routines, helping them build their own habits or rituals, build in time for transitions, such as using SAMS timers, warnings, verbal cues, or visual cues and aids, prioritizing and not being over schedules, using checklists, visual schedules, things like that. What have you tried? Have you tried some of these things naturally and didn't really realize that you were actually implementing some of these strategies already? So the next one is sensory input to modulate arousal. So manipulating the amount of sensory input, whether that's less or more calming, to create a just right level or find that optimal state of arousal, as we talked about earlier. So occupational therapists often use sensory diets as a tool, which are structured sensory activities incorporated throughout the day to assist with managing sensory needs. For example, if we need stimulating activities, we can implement change, unexpected things, unpredictability, faster erratic movements, sudden or loud sounds, brighter shiny colors, and trying to really tap into the child's sensory system to make these things more stimulating throughout their day. The other side of things is the calming strategies. So we want to look at similarity, familiarity, slow and rhythmic movements, quiet settings, dim and light colors, breathing strategies, sucking strategies like sucking through a straw can be very calming. For each of these sensory categories, there are stimulating and calming strategies for each. And I'm just going to name a few to help you start getting to think about it. So for an auditory sense, stimulating things may be, again, the loud noises, sudden or unexpected sounds, a quick rise in time, such as a sneeze or a cough, whereas calming things would be slow and predictable sounds, melodic and rhythmic sounds. The taste or the gustatory system, some stimulating things would be sour, crunchy foods, cold foods, spicy foods, or new foods, whereas calming things would be easy to chew and swallow foods, bland in flavor, bland in color, flavor and color, without spices, and predictable or favorite foods. In the visual sense, some stimulating things are clutter, bright lights, quickly moving objects, whereas some things that are calming are being in an organized space with minimal decor, with pale colors, and dim lighting. In a tactile approach for stimulating things, we would look at quick and erratic touch, tickling, and high-frequency vibrations. Whereas for calming, we would look at firm, deep pressure with slow and rhythmic touch. Vestibular approach would be spinning, swinging, rolling, bouncing, jumping, inversion, which is going upside down, or using scooter boards and things like that to move fast through planes of movement. Whereas calming things would be linear movement. So rocking and swinging is a really nice calming strategy for vestibular input. In a proprioceptive sense, some stimulating things would be jumping and crashing, running, things like that. Whereas a calming strategy would be deep pressure, such as hugs, swaddling, deep pressure massages, weighted items, joint compressions, and heavy work, such as pushing, pulling, carrying, things like that. Down again onto the pyramid of evidence-based strategies, we're looking at cognitive self-regulation strategies. So these are strategies that are aimed at increasing an individual's self-awareness and developing appropriate coping strategies at these times. So these tactics enable problem solving, they encourage brainstorming, build capacity within the individuals themselves. So some things we use at Thrive are social stories, power cards, a program called 5 Can Make You Lose Control, How's Your Engine Running, a problem-solving matrix, and the zones of regulation are all concepts of that. So for desensitization, this is a technique that we don't use very often here at Thrive, and it's modifying how sensitive an individual is to particular input. So it consists of frequent short bursts of stimuli that shower the brain with input to help facilitate acclimatization to the stimuli to make it more tolerable. And at the very bottom of the pyramid, we have the target sensory processing at the brain level. So we don't really use this. We don't use this at Thrive at all. So these are techniques to help disorganize the brain in hopes that the brain will reorganize itself properly. We don't, again, use these at Thrive, but they require specific training and certification. So these programs are typically called the therapeutic listening program, rhythmic movement therapy, oxygen therapy, and air pressure protocol. So other strategies that we may also use that aren't on this list are referrals to other appropriate agencies or professionals, further developing social skills, and participating in self-regulation and education. Okay, so lastly, we want to look at, is the intervention working, and what the next steps would be. So we try to limit our interventions to one intervention at a time so we can be aware if the interventions are working. So consider the following things. Has the child's tolerance increased? Has the seeking behavior stopped? Has the intensity of the stress behavior stopped? Has so the adult, stress or perception of the behavior changed? You can also look at the pre and post measures to see if there's any notable differences, for example, tracking behaviors. We would normally wrap this education up by exploring the sensory equipment that we have at the center and discussing how it makes us feel. But with this approach, we're unable to do so. So as an alternative, I would suggest that you think of some things and some options that you have readily available at home or in your community to assist with managing sensory input differences. Mallory and I have also created a video of us exploring most of the sensory equipment that we have at Thrive, just so that you can get an idea of what it looks like, and we are talking to you about what it feels like, and maybe you'll get a chance to check it out too. I just want to thank you all for being here and learning about sensory processing and how it can impact day-to-day activities, impact day-to-day functioning. And now I think that you have the tools to kind of start thinking about this a little bit more and employing some of the strategies that we've talked about. We'll see you through the sensory clinic if you're coming through, or if you have a core occupational therapist, you can discuss any questions or concerns that you might have with them.
Hello, Mallory and I here again. We're going to show you some of the sensory stuff that we have here. We packed as much stuff as we can fit into this room, so we're just going to show you a few things. So we can show you some things that we typically recommend and why we might do that. So just so you know, this is just for us to explore things with you. It's not to like go and buy these things on your own or start exploring things on your own. It's definitely recommended to be referred by your OT. For most of the stuff, but feel free to check out some of the stuff. So we have, what do we have to start here? We have a balance beam.
Clearly my balance isn't great.
So normally we would be having that with a hazard-free environment without the trampoline beside it, but we're just in a tight space. So how did that make you feel, Mallory? What do you think that was affecting with sensory system?
Well, it's targeting my vestibular because it's, you don't know if you can see it. Let me go back. It's soft, so, and narrow, so it makes it tricky to walk on. It's not like a hard surface, so. Oh, I usually have better balance than this.
Yeah, so definitely testing your balance and your coordination. Absolutely. Yep. So that's that guy. It's definitely a challenger for your vestibular system, no doubt. So we're going to get him out of the way. We have more space. Then we have our, how many people have a trampoline in their house? Like, whether you have a big one outside or a little one inside for the kiddos. Great for your proprioceptive input, your vestibular input. So your movement up and down is going to be giving for your vestibular input, and then the pressure of the impact of the jump is called your proprioceptive input. So that is a good one too. That often helps kiddos with breaks throughout the day. Anything else to add to that? No? I'm going to move this one out. Okay. So we have more space. Handy dandy.
Oh, scooter board.
Can't go wrong with scooter board. How long has it been since you've been on those?
Yeah.
What do you think that's activating?
Coordination, balance, or vestibular.
Yep.
Kids can also do it by laying flat on their bellies.
Let's use more input and pressure because that's a big high receptor center.
And something they like to do is push off the wall.
Yeah. Well, them rocket launchers, let me just say.
Okay.
Let's do a rocket launcher. So you can screw around on your bottom, you can go on your belly, and then Mallory's also going to demonstrate the good old rocket launcher.
Ooh. Okay.
You good? Yes.
Okay. I just push up, right?
Yeah.
Ugh.
That gives a lot of feedback for kiddos. It gives vestibular, really fast, abrupt vestibular input because you're going fast, and also proprioceptive input by pushing off the wall with their feet. So it gives them a lot of input. It can also be stimulating to the visual center, because you're going fast through at that plane, down at this low plane. It's going to make things go by a lot quicker, so it'll really activate that visual system as well.
And again, make sure with more space and not like a wall for them to crash into.
Yeah, a lot of space. Even
do astronaut more blind down the room.
Yep. So we have this thing called an astronaut board. Some of you may or may not have seen them before. It comes with a specific recommendation. It also comes with a specific plan. So I'm not going to go through what those plans are because that's going to be specifically recommended by your OT. But it does spin around. It's a rotational board. It's called the Astronaut Training Program, and that's what we use this from. So there's a certain rotational series that we do either sitting, so like Mallory is right now, and then you can, spin this way or the other way, and that's going to activate your vestibular system immensely. So, or you can also do it in side lying. So do you want to show them the side lying one? Yeah. Okay. Remember, these are for kids. So Mallory's doing her best here. Okay. So good. Really, really, really good to activate your vestibular and your visual centers. So that, again, comes with a prescription from the OT. There are certain rotations that you need to do at certain speeds that I'm not going to go through that with you right now.
Ooh. For someone who gets dizzy, this is very terrible.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's how we can work on it. And so this is how it is on the other side. And this is the part that rotates. So, I can get into this one if you want. Okay, you can do that one. I'm feeling flexible today, although I'm feeling not very coordinated. Okay, well, so it's our green spinning wheel. Kids love this. I really told you I'm really bad at my coordination today. So you can spin them this way, and usually they go a lot faster. I'm just too heavy. Or you can rock it.
And then front to back or side to side.
Yeah. Woo! So huge for, again, that vestibular and visual field centers. And we often start kind of sessions with this to get kiddos engaged and active and to have a lot of fun with it. Any other systems do you think that it would activate? Pardon? Definitely probably proprioception, because you're kind of hovering into like a ball, curling up into a ball. And there's a lot of feedback. There's bumps inside of the bowl, which I'll show you in a moment when I can get out. There's bumps in here that get some feedback for tactile input as well. And it's because it puts you into that flexion position, it does give a lot of proprioceptive feedback as well. So that's that guy. Now we have, I guess we can go through the weighted products. So this is a snake. You can stuff it with some weights. It's fun for younger children. And you can put some weights on it. They can just hold it onto their shoulders. Good for homeschool or even the community for that guy. And this is a weighted hat. So for kiddos who need a lot more input throughout the day, especially on the go, this is a really good option. They can take it on, put it on and take it off as they need to. It just gives you some nice pressure into your head, which is a huge receptor area for sensory processing. So it's really interesting. It's not too thick, as you can tell. It kind of fits on like a normal hat. It's a little squishy in the front here. That's where the weights are, but it's not overly interfering. And it just looks like a regular hat, everyday hat, which is great. I don't know how many pounds this has, but it felt good. We also have weighted vests. So we often
doesn't fit me properly, but would fit a child.
Yeah, so we have, you can put a certain amount of weights and distribute them evenly for whatever weight would be recommended by your OT for your child, depending on their weight, and that will affect how many. So that's what we fill it with, either little metal plates, or we also have like little bean bags that fit into those pockets, depends which ones we have. So that's a good way to offer some input. We have certain prescription again for how often you'd wear it and how long you'd wear it and what weight to use for it. So that would be prescribed by your OT. Some other quick things that we often do for classrooms are move and sit cushions. So this one's just filled with air, and it's also got bumps on the side, so it really gives some feedback for your tactile center and your vestibular center as well as your proprioceptive center. So it gives a lot of feedback, so they can sit and they can do their wiggle squirm, but in a more appropriate way, so they're not going all over the room. They're kind of sticking to one area, and it gives them the input that they need without being disruptive.
Kids can use it during carpet time, or can go in their chairs.
Yes, which is awesome. It's portable. This one is similar, but it's filled with big beads. So
big marbles.
yes. So how does that feel for you, Mal? What centers do you think you're targeting there?
I find it comfortable. It lets you kind of can move without being too disruptive. But target again your vestibular, proprioceptive,
And tactile, yeah.
tactile.
But this one is more distractive, like you said. That one's a little more subtle, but it still gives you the same input. So those are some other things that we have. And sorry again, the vest and the weighted snake activate your proprioceptive system. We didn't go through that, but that's typically what we'll use those for, to activate those, to help us with our body awareness and knowing where our body is in space. So a lot of those weighted products. And we have this.
I've never seen this before.
No?
No.
It's just the tactile bag. So if your kiddo is like a tactile seeker and they tend to like touch a lot of things in their environment and they're having a hard time regulating that, you might put certain times of the day where they can go into the bag and feel the different tactile sensations that they like. So this is like a snake skin. This one's kind of like the corduroy, soft like velvety, and then this one's got like small bumps on it, but it's like a cotton material. And we have our fuzzy guy. This other crinkle, a little crinkle, a little fuzzy guy. Same one as the other one. And then there's like a rough Velcro, the soft side of Velcro texture, and then there's like the shiny smooth. I think and then silky. So there's just some variety in here, and some kiddos like to take little breaks throughout the day to give those centers a little bit of an exploration. So then we have something for auditory, our noise canceling headphones, which are used again nice and portable. You can use them in the community at parades or games or anything like that, as well as in the classroom when there's lots of multiple sounds going on. So those are some times where the noise canceling headphones would be effective.
And they're nice because I can still hear Justine, but it just blocks out like the fan and the hum of the room, and I just hear Justine, which is nice.
Helps you kind of focus.
Let's do that line down.
Oh, we're gonna do that. Okay. So Valerie's gonna demonstrate to us this guy. This guy is called the steamroller. It gives an excessive amount of proprioceptive input. They're gonna come through to tell us how it made her feel. How you do down there?
Makes me feel old.
Got through.
Oh.
I love that. And so now did that, it comes with these rubber attachments which go in different levels, so it makes it stronger or weaker. Mel didn't have any strength on there, so she could get through it.
Yep.
And then how did that feel for you?
Well, for me, awkward and uncomfortable, but for a kiddo, some of them even just like to get halfway through and then hang out and just let it give them a nice tight squeeze.
Yeah.
And it's always been very popular when we've used it, and even like in obstacle courses with kids as a little station. Yeah.
So it's good. It's awesome. It provides like I said, an immense amount of feedback for the proprioceptive system. However, it is very limiting in its portability. Of course, it's really heavy and it's pretty big.
But like Mallory was saying, your glasses on, it was fine.
I would take your glasses off.
So you want to push your head through, push your arms through first, so that it kind of like leads the way. And then you push your head through. I hear what you're saying. And then you can kind of, some kids like to like roll back and forth, like Mallory said. You like to hang out there. It gives you a really tight squeeze.
Kids don't like this one tends to be the kids who really like that deep pressure. So when they're upset, they want that really big bear hug and that big squeeze. They really like these ones.
Yeah, they're great for that. So. All right, give these a go. These are called tactile discs. They send a lot of tactile input. It also activates your vestibular system because it's changing your the planes. They're some are higher, some are lower, so it's changing those grades. We have the big ones, and then we also have the little ones. So it depends. We'll let kids kind of explore sometimes and figure out which ones they like, because we have a lot of sensory receptors in our feet, so these can be really powerful for some of those tactile seeker kiddos.
That's one of my favorite.
That one you like?
Yeah. Like a massage under feet.
Which one? What other ones do you like? Or which ones do you not like?
I don't really like the purple one.
Really hard and pointy.
Yeah.
It's more like a subtle.
Yeah, that jogs you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like this one either. The big bumpy ones are my favorite.
And you'll notice too, all kids have their own, and even adults will have their own preferences to what they prefer.
Yeah. There's these little guys too, which are.
I don't like the little ones.
Maybe it would be better for.
Oh,
that was gonna hurt. That one hurts actually.
Yeah.
Like me, but a kiddo seeking that tactile input might really like that. It's like stepping on rocks.
Yeah.
So, and this one as well. It's like stepping on rocks. So that's just another example. We also have our Lycra swing, which is not currently being used. You put the kiddo inside of here, it would rotate, or it could also rock back and forth in more of a linear motion for more of a calming input.
So that's important. So back and forth motions are more calming than rotational or spinning.
Yeah.
So even on the scooter board and the astronaut board, any kind of spinning will get kids excited, whereas back and forth will help to calm them.
So huge for vestibular, also huge for proprioceptive centers because of the feedback it gives when you're inside of it. It scoops you up like a big hug. It's just
made of like the bathing suit material.
Yeah. It's huge as both material as well. Yeah. We also have this guy. I don't know if you want to see the lights on, so just some calming. This can be calming or it can be stimulating based on the kiddo's sensory system. But it's like a rotational
disco ball,
but it's I find it calming. What do you think about it?
I don't find it calming.
No?
I like it, but it like runs me up a bit.
Yeah, I'm too excited. I could just stare at this for probably 10 minutes and just enjoy that.
Now, like my daughter has one that projects the stars on her bedroom ceiling, and that I find calming.
Yeah.
But this one with the spin, I don't know, makes me want to start to dance.
Awesome. Start the dance party. So those are some things. I do have one more thing as well, but I have to go get it. So I'm going to go get that really quick and put you on pause. Okay, so one more thing. They just came in the mail today from Elliott Lakes. That's why they are in my office, but they're colored glasses. Here, Mel, want to try a few with me? Sure. There's similar colors, but.
Do you take off your glasses?
Well, I'd probably fit them over too, but they're smaller because they're for kids. So So this is greenish blue for me, these ones. And I don't know that it does much difference for my visual system. but you try another one. How do you think those ones do for you?
They're all annoying right now because they fog up with the mask.
Yeah.
Which is probably a sensory stressor for some of our kiddos who wear glasses and masks.
100%.
If they haven't perfected the placement of glasses and masks and.
Totally agree. There's these pink ones.
Yeah, purple or magenta.
Yeah. So this I find a little more like stimulating.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but like I feel like things are a lot brighter, and so if I was more of like the low registration kiddo, I might like these to get a little more stimulated. There's that. These are the pinhole ones. We also have orange and yellow that someone has them on loan right now. So what do you think those do for you?
I don't like them.
I don't know if I can use them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we can't share.
Yeah.
No, they're just, I find them very uncomfortable. Like it hurts my eyes.
Yeah.
Because you're essentially seeing through pinholes.
Well, some kids will find them help with focus, because some kids find the pinhole ones help them with focus and attention, because it helps like block out some of the other stuff in the environment. But every kiddo, like Mallory said earlier, every sensory system is totally different. So we can say how these things affect us, but that's why it's usually a fun time to do when we have these sessions in person, because the parents are able to try it and see how they really feel too. And we missed that today, but that's okay. Hopefully some of this was informative for you today, and you got to see some of the things that we have here and some of the options. Some things are not available right now due to COVID reasons, and they can't be cleaned well. So some things we weren't able to show you today, but this is a lot of what we have and a lot of what we often recommend. So. Awesome. Good. All right. Thank you for tuning in.